Today I'm going to demonstrate how to use watercolors. I have a couple different options for my students today. My third graders were working on still life pictures. One option that they have is to outline their pictures with an oil pastel. And I used a black oil pastel. And then when I'm done using the black oil pastel, I used watercolor paints. So I need watercolor paints for that step. I would also need a little bit of water. It's not very full. It's just about not even halfway full. And I would also need a paintbrush. And so to get started with the watercolors, I would put my brush right inside the water, swish it around. And I always swipe on the side, not tap, tap, because that spreads water everywhere. So swish, swish, swipe, swipe. And then whatever color I'm going to use, I'm going to kind of wake it up by tickling inside of the paint. So I've got the orange on my brush, so I can go ahead and finish my pumpkin. And right now I can tell I have a lot more orange on my brush than I did when I was up here because it's making a darker color. So I'm going to use that darker color and kind of go over my pumpkin. And then I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush so that my orange isn't quite as dark over on this side. And so now I have some different values, some light places that I have watercolor and some dark places. Now when I'm using watercolor, one thing about them is that I can go right over the oil pastel lines if I'm using them together because oil and water don't mix. So I'm rinsing my brush, swish, 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 swipe, swipe, and I'm going to do the brown basket now. So I'm going to tickle on here, and I can tell I have a lot of brown pigment, and I don't want it to be that dark. So I'm going to add a little bit of water, a little more paint here, and now since oil and water don't mix, I can go right over the top of those lines. I don't have to be careful about where I'm painting. So then in between my color here, I'm going to mix that up here. Swish, 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 swipe, 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 and then I can go on and use another color. Now if my color gets dirty, like my yellow kind of did there, maybe from another artist, what you can do is use a paper towel to kind of easily clean those out. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you here in just a moment. So this squash that we were kind of drawing was like a greenish yellow. It had some yellow stripes. And so I kind of mixed a little bit of the yellow with the green there. This was my own set of watercolors that I was using. I'm not sharing with anyone else, so I'm not mixing up their art. So to clean that out, what I can do is just take this paper towel and just kind of gently and carefully wipe that green right out of the yellow. And so now my yellow is clean and it's a pure color again. I don't have green mixed in with that. So yesterday while I was cleaning out my closet, I found these watercolor crayons, which I have never used before, but we were doing a little experimenting with them. So my students can also use these as an option. You take the crayon and you dip it just right inside some water. And they probably want to have a gauze paper. We call gauze paper good on one side. So they can kind of make sure that they get the crayon going. And so then on here, they can use the crayon, and it takes a little while once you get the crayon coloring, and then adding a little bit of water, it starts to spread. So I can color in this pumpkin. Now I've got a little bit thinner of a piece of paper than they're working with, so they'll be able to add a little bit more water. And even after I'm done coloring, I can add that water, and it kind of smears it together. Smooths it out like it would if it was a paintbrush. So maybe I want to add a little bit of yellow, and I could go over that with yellow, and those colors could kind of mix together. So I was working over here on this corn, and I was kind of doing a little bit of orange in it, and then getting the yellow wet, and doing a little bit of yellow, and then I did some red as well. So I kind of have this mixed up colored corn now. Now I do want everybody in the class to outline their project in some way. So if my students are going to choose to use the crayons, the watercolor crayons to color their artwork with, I'm going to ask that they use a watercolor pencil to outline with when they're done. So this is a watercolor pencil, and on there it actually has a paintbrush. You can see it right here, so that's how you know the difference. And they would get this pencil wet just like you do with the crayon, dip it in. And I was making the corn kernels by just making ovals right over the top of what I had drawn here. I just colored that in with the colors. And now I can go around the outside of the corn. And my hand's getting wet in my pumpkin, so I maybe need to turn this over so I'm not smearing my other artwork. So this can work as a nice outlining pen. Okay. I could also use this just to color in my spider. If it's a fine line, I'm going to get this wet. And it works just kind of like a paint stick. So if it's dry, it'll work like a colored pencil, but if I add a little bit of water to it, it smears like a paint stick. So I'm doing this spider, and then I'm going to do his other legs here. And then I'm going to do his eyes, and I think I'm probably going to use the colored pencil to do the eyes. So I'll get this wet here. Maybe do a little experimenting over there. There we go. Now I have his eyes are red. I can go in with the stick here and finish that up. So my students have the options today of using watercolored pencils, watercolored crayons, or watercolor paints. And they are going to be working on filling in their still life with color today. This is a lesson on using different types of watercolors in the art room.